how to stay inspired on the spiritual path. A very, very important topic, because life is going to give us challenges. It's going to give us tests, and our energy itself will rise and fall. Master taught that energy and life is like, it has a waveform to it. The wave rises and crests, and then it reaches the peak, and then it crashes down, and then it reaches a trough. He also said something both interesting and a little bit frightening. He said, if the sea gets too calm, we will purposely rile it up again into a waveform, because we enjoy the excitement of the ups and downs of life. But in the flow of those ups and downs, we will be inspired at one time, and then we'll be losing inspiration at a later time. We'll be feeling like we're really on top of things, and then we'll feel challenged and unable to meet the challenge. Isn't it true? I'm sure you've experienced it. It's just part of living, that this is the rhythm of it. Well, how do we stay inspired in the midst of all of this? In fact, the solution, the secret, is in the word itself, inspiration. Inspiration means inhaling. It's another word for the inhaling breath. Why would inspiration be connected to inhaling breath? Because when we inhale, there is a rising energy flow in the spine itself. Really, the outer breath is connected to the inner breath, the astral breath. And when the astral breath rises, physically we inhale, and when the astral breath goes down, it too has this cycle, this rhythm to it. And when it goes down, then we exhale. So if we want to stay inspired, the key is to have an upward flow of energy. It's really that simple. The problem is in how to do it and how to maintain the ability to do it. Isn't that right? It's not easy to keep that energy going. Swami gave a very interesting definition of enthusiasm. He said, enthusiasm is the power of joy, or the quality of joy, channeled through the willpower. Isn't that interesting? The power of joy, or the quality of joy channeled through the willpower. And so if we can find within ourselves that central point which is always joyful, and channel that through our willpower, then we're going to be enthusiastic, and when we're enthusiastic, we'll be inspired. You know, we have three primary, one might say, facilities that we work with. One is the intellect, the other is the heart, the feeling nature, and in between is the willpower. Master said that willpower, or will, is desire plus energy focused on the completion of some goal of ours. If we want to be inspired, then we have to have the willpower, the enthusiasm of joy channeled through that willpower, and the energy should be channeled on keeping our energy positive. And we can work on it on all three of these levels. Affirmations, anything that will keep our mind positively engaged is going to help with with being able to stay inspired. Anything that makes you negative, any habitual patterns such as judgmentalism or excessive emotionality that brings your energy down, is going to depress your inspiration. So keeping the mind in a positive direction is the first thing. There are many ways that we can work at this. One is to, Master said something really interesting. He said, one of the absolute keys to living is simply this: pay attention. Pay attention to what you're doing at the time that you're doing it. So often our mind is wandering, and when the mind wanders, it becomes vague, it becomes dispersed, and we aren't able to then control it very well. In the Gita, Arjuna says to Krishna, the mind is harder to control than the wind. How do I work with this? And Krishna's his reply, but Master's interpretation of this as explanation is that the wind represents the pranayama, or the breath. Remember the inspiration and expiration? If we can begin to control the breath, we can begin to control the restlessness of the mind, because we're beginning to take control of our energy. Most of our techniques on this path are based on exactly that principle of controlling the energy, of controlling the flow of prana, the basic techniques, and most especially the great technique of Kriya Yoga is directly pointed toward the ability to take control of that energy. And so by taking control of that energy, we are able to take control of the mind, and we're also able to take control of the reactive process. The reactive process where we're one might say, empowered by our likes and dislikes, and they drive us to make the choices that we make in life. Swami Kriyananda's father had or I think it was his mother, both of them had a good sense of humor, but I think it was his mother that said this. She said about somebody that Swami mentioned, she said, oh yes, she has a whim of steel, meaning that she's simply completely driven by whatever whimsical thoughts come into her mind. But if we learn to take control over our inner energy, our prana, through the practices of meditation, through the practices of Kriya Yoga, then we are going to be able to direct that energy in a positive way. You know, many times the question is asked, especially here in India, why did God create the universe? And the typical answer is, well, it's God's Leela, it's His play. But I liked Swami Kriyananda's answer to that much better. He said, God is joy. That's one of His essential traits: existence, consciousness, and bliss. God is bliss. It is the very nature of bliss to want to share itself with others. Isn't that beautiful? So if you can get in touch with your joy, which you should try to do at the end of every meditation, then being in touch with that joy will naturally make you enthusiastic. You'll want to share everything with others. You want to share possessions, you want to share peace, you want to share support. Most of all, you'll want to share friendship and kindness with other people. And in that sharing of kindness and support, God is the higher consciousness, the consciousness of God. Yoga is union. It's that which unites us to God, but it also are those practices that unite us to each other. And so when the heart is engaged in wanting to unite one with another, then naturally everything begins to flow better. There's a beautiful story about Ananda Ma, and well, I'll just stop with a little footnote here. When I met Ma, along with Swami Kriyananda in 1974, 50 years ago. My, how a lifetime flies away. So 50 years ago, I met Ma, and I asked her this very question: how do you stay inspired on the spiritual path? And she gave an answer that at the time I don't think I understood in the depth with which she meant it. She said, ask your guru. Partly she said that because Swami was sitting there, and she didn't want to intrude on the guru-disciple relationship. But there's a deeper reason to it too. Ask your guru. Everything that you're having trouble with, ask your guru, because he represents God in visible form, and he's the spoken word of God. And so if you're having difficulty, it's because your energy has become contractive. And the very aspect, the very thought of asking your guru, how do I solve this? What should I do about this? Tell me, Master. Show me the way. That lifts the energy up. But coming back to the story about Ma, there was a disciple of hers who was just very new, and he was a relatively restless fellow. And so he was following Ma, but he would, after a little while, he noticed this pattern that Ma would never stayed still for very long. I mean, she would stay still, and then she would get up and she'd move to another location. And his thought was judgmental. I'm very attracted to her and her teachings, but why is she so restless all the time? I just don't understand that. He, of course, was restless, the one who was restless. Anyway, at one point, he accompanied Ma and a small group of people, and they went to a relatively remote area, and where there was a lake. They were staying in a little hut. And one morning, shortly after they arrived, Ma said, let's have a picnic today. We'll have a picnic lunch and we'll go out, sit by the lake and have a picnic together. And this fellow thought, well, that's a good idea. And so they packed up a picnic lunch. They went out to the lake. They spread a blanket on the ground. They took the food out. They laid the food out. He was just about to eat, and Ma said, it's time to go. Well, you can imagine his reaction. So he was, oh, here she is again. She can't even sit still long enough for me to eat. And so they walked about 100 yards, and then Ma stopped under a tree. And she waited, and after about 30 seconds, a little baby bird fell out of the tree at her feet. There was a boy with her. She said, please pick it up and hold it up. Held up this baby bird, and it fluttered its wings, and then it died. And she said, this is the reason that we came here. The soul of this bird was calling out to me. It knew that it was about to die, and it wanted darshan before it died. And that's the reason that we came here. And then this young man began to understand there's a deeper aspect to God. There's a deeper resonance of connection between things. So if we can tap into that connection between us and other people, between us and higher consciousness, how do you do that? Ask your guru. Ask your guru. Continually let your mind be referenced back to the guru, because the guru will have not only the answers intellectually, but his grace will infuse your willpower, but it will infuse it in a certain way. It will infuse it with joy, and the power of joy flowing through your willpower will give you enthusiasm. And when you have enthusiasm, indeed, you will stay inspired.
So I'll also share a few words with all of you. First of all, as Jyotish said, we're so happy to be here in India. It's our spiritual home, truly, and all of you are our spiritual family. And traveling in many places and sharing Master's teachings, you always have to, whatever the language, you have to translate the consciousness, because most people in most cultures don't have the openness, the understanding that is so innate in Indian culture, that God is the only reality, that He permeates all life, that He permeates our life, and that the purpose of life is to reunite with Him. Only from India has this understanding come. And so when we share our Guru's teachings with you, it's as though we already speak the same language. So part of one of the obstacles on the spiritual path is that we think of it like, we think in terms of worldly accomplishments. Oh, I graduated from this school, I got this degree, I got this promotion, etc., etc. And we translate that into our spiritual life. Oh, well, I'm on level 1, I'm on level 2, I got Kriya Yoga now. But we need to understand that it's not the same. The spiritual path isn't the same as outward accomplishments, because the spiritual path is not points in time, but it is a flow of energy. And then the question becomes, as Jyotish has been saying, how do we keep that flow of energy? And because often people, unfortunately, they'll get Kriya, Yoga initiation, and then they'll think, okay, I did it, and I go back to my life now. And it happens far too often. And so how to understand that all of life is a flow of energy. It's like jumping into a beautiful, pure, cool river, and the current is Guru. The current is what's moving us forward. We have to do our part. We have to, swim and put out energy and willpower, but it's a journey of many lifetimes. And I think it's important for all of you to understand, as I assume most of you or all of you are disciples of Master, his path is a very high path in the sense that it's not for beginners. One time we were hosting another spiritual leader at Ananda Village with Swamiji, and they were sitting together, this other spiritual leader, and I was serving their table. And Swami said to this other man, but I knew he was really saying it to me, he said, look at all these young people. They've given their life to God, to Master. They have had to be his disciples for many lifetimes. And I heard that, and I thought, okay, here's lunch. But it's true for each of you. You wouldn't be drawn to this path. This is not an entry-level path to God. This is an advanced track to God. And appreciate that in yourself, not for any ego affirmation, but just that you've been on the path before, and that's what has drawn you to this path now. I would even venture to say you've been disciples of Master before, because how many people look at Autobiography of a Yogi and just pass it by? How many people stop? You know, when we were in Spain, we did a number of weekend retreats and programs, and there was one woman from Ecuador, I believe, who shared an amazing story with us. She had lived in Silicon Valley in California, and she worked in a big hotel. And one weekend, they were hosting a big conference with Steve Jobs, the head of Apple, the founder and inventor, and all the staff had to sign a document that said, you will not talk to Steve Jobs. You will not bother him. And if you talk to him, you lose your job. And so they all signed this paper. So she was serving Steve Jobs his lunch, but right next to his plate, he had a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi. And she was so drawn to it. She said, I don't care. She told us, I don't care if I lose my job. I have to ask him what this book is. She'd never seen it before, but just looking at the picture. And she said, excuse me, sir, I hate to bother you, but what is this book? And he put down what he was doing. He turned to her and he said, this is the most important book you will ever read in your life. And he talked to her about autobiography. He said, I get all of my inspiration for everything I've done from reading this book. And he said, don't worry, I won't tell the staff that you talked to me. And she didn't lose her job. But why was she so drawn to that picture? Why? Other people were walking around. There was a connection. And I shared that with you because you need to understand it's sort of like fostering an already existing friendship. I don't know if you've ever met someone, I've had the experience in my life, where you just feel like you were old friends, like I know you from before. And Master said it's very important to cultivate those friendships that we recognize from other lifetimes. Well, even more important to foster, to develop the relationship of your guru from past lifetimes. So remember that. But then how do we keep swimming in this current of God, Master's consciousness, God and Guru, that brings us at the end to the great ocean of God consciousness? And in Master's beautiful poem, God, 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 there's a verse that says, no matter where I go, the spotlight of my mind forever keeps turning to thee, and in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be, God, God, God. So no matter where you go, the spotlight of your mind can always be directed towards God. And in the battle din of activity, there still can be some part of your mind that is observing, that is detached, that is resting in God and Guru. And no matter how difficult it becomes, and we all know life is demanding and challenging and difficult, but if the spotlight of our mind can ever be turning on God, then that's really the key to keeping inspired in your spiritual path. Because the world, really, the world has one purpose, to distract us. And it can be doing it on a million different levels. But our soul is crying out for the bliss of God that only comes from concentrating on a higher plane. And if we can, is it easy? No, it's not easy at all. If it were easy, everybody in the world would be on the spiritual path. But is it worth doing? It's the only thing worth doing, because everything else ends in sand and dust through our hands. But the spiritual life is that which enriches every aspect of our life. And so, how do we do this? How do we keep concentrated? Keep the spotlight of our mind ever turning on God? Well, Master's path, the teachings he brought to the West, that it was interesting. I read recently, Master said, I was called to the West by our great line of masters because the people of America particularly were seeking a technique to find God. They had natural enthusiasm for a spiritual life, but they had no techniques to find it. All they had were different religions and so forth. So that's what brought him to the West. But his teachings apply on so many different levels. He gives us a lot of teaching when you read his writings and his lectures about for the body, how to keep the body fit for self-realization. That was one of his quotes. And, things like, keep the mind focused. Look at what you're eating. Look at your habit patterns. Look at the people you associate with. Look at your patterns of sleeping and analyze them all and try to form a life pattern that is conducive to a spiritual search. If you're trying to meditate, but you're out socializing with your friends till late at night, you're not going to get up early in the morning and meditate. Or if you're eating a big, greasy, heavy meal, you're not going to be able to do Kriya as well. And so all the different aspects of your life need to support the spiritual path. It's not that hard, really. You just kind of, anything. That's why we chose that affirmation on perseverance. Anything we need to do in life, you have to set your goals, or else you don't accomplish it. If you just sort of vaguely think, well, maybe I'll graduate from college, you won't. But if you think, I need to do this and this and this, well, Master gave us a roadmap to find God, starting with the physical body. How do we work with our mind? As you know, that wonderful incident in Autobiography of a Yogi, where Master, he's just met his guru, Sri Yukteswar, and then he goes away to be with his family and travel. Then he comes back and he's in the guru's ashram, Sri Yukteswar's ashram, and he's meditating. And Sri Yukteswar calls him down, Mukunda! And he doesn't respond, and because he's meditating. And then Sri Yukteswar again says, Mukunda, come here. And he said, I'm meditating, Master. He's up in some room. And Sri Yukteswar, you know, I have to say this. When you first come on the path, Sri Yukteswar is kind of hard to relate to. But the more you stay on the path, you just say, yes, I need that kind of discipline and that kind of wise objectivity. And so Master says, I'm meditating, sir. And Sri Yukteswar says, I know how you're meditating, with your mind like dry leaves in the wind. Mukunda, come down. And he comes down, and do you know the rest of that chapter? Sri Yukteswar touches him, and it's the experience in cosmic consciousness. But the restlessness of the mind, that's one of the biggest challenges on the spiritual path. And so Master talks a lot about introspection. Look at your thought patterns. When I sit to meditate, what do I always think about? Is it finances? Is it problems with other people? Is it health issues? Analyze it and see, oh my gosh, I'm starting to do Hong Sa, and then I'm thinking about how I had that fight with that person. And so be aware of the habitual thought patterns. And when they start coming up, you stop them. But unless you can really see what they are, they'll just haunt you. They'll be in the subconscious mind going around and around. So analyze those patterns of thoughts and actions, and keep the spotlight of your mind turned towards your goal, not getting distracted in many things. You know, Swamiji, he accomplished a remarkable amount in his life. You know, he started communities all over the world. He wrote 150 books, not pamphlets, but books filled with spiritual teaching, and 400 pieces of music. His mind was so concentrated. It was so beautiful to observe him. Sometimes Keshava would know too. He served as Swami's secretary for a while. But he would be working on a book, and very often when he was at Ananda Village, our little home is quite near to where he lived, just a few minute walk. And he would, every day at 5 o'clock, when he was in residence at the village, we would sit by the phone, and the phone would ring at 5 o'clock every day, and he would be swimming. Oh, hello, would you like to come down for tea? As though, you know, this was the first time. We said, of course, Swami, and then we'd go down for tea. But very often he would be editing his book, a book that he was working on. And so we come in very quietly into his living room, and he'd look up, he'd acknowledge us, but he would keep editing until he finished the section he would work on. And we would just stand there very quietly, trying to absorb his concentration. And then when he'd finished what he was doing, he would look up and he said, oh, would you like tea? And we said, yes, Swamiji. And so the ability to focus on what you're doing, even in a practical sense, if you're cooking a meal, focus on that. If you're taking care of your children and reading them a story, focus on that. The spotlight of your mind forever keeps turning on God, and that enables you to concentrate on anything that you're doing. And in that why is that important? Well, you'll do a better job, but more than that, it's because in that concentration, you transcend ego awareness. And in that concentration is forgetfulness of self. And it's such a wonderful experience. Once Swami was moving into his house at the Crystal Hermitage, that's where his house is, at Ananda Village, and he was anxious to get in. The painters hadn't come to paint the inside yet, so he came up to a group of us at breakfast in the ashram, and he said, "Would anyone like to come and help me paint my house?" Everybody said, "Yes, yes, Swamiji." And so a group of us went, and we were painting his house. We started at about 10 in the morning, and then at about 1, he said, "Okay, let's take a break for lunch." And then we took a break. We came back an hour later, and then he said, "Okay, let's pick up our painting." And we were painting and painting and painting, painting, painting. And then finally, Swami said, "Oh, okay, I think we'll call it quits for the day." We looked at our watch. We'd been painting for 6 hours straight without stopping. From 2 in the afternoon till, from 2 in the afternoon to actually it was like 3 in the morning. So, but we were not tired. We had totally lost awareness of the passage of time. And what was that about? It wasn't about painting. It was about Swami showing us the power of concentration and self-transcendence. And that will be a lesson that will stick with me for all of my life. And so, using the mind to transcend the restlessness, to keep us inspired. And then finally, of course, the deeper soul nature to keep us inspired on the spiritual path. Always try to keep your spiritual life fresh. Try to keep your inspiration fresh. Chanting is a wonderful tool, inwardly chanting all the time if you can, or doing a mantra all the time. Reading devotional things. Jyotish and I have a practice before we go to sleep at night. Each of us will read a talk of masters, just maybe a page, not a long thing, but it just keeps so we go to sleep with master's vibration in our mind, and then we wake up and we try to look at master's picture, and so just this continuity of devotional focus, always bringing that back to that point. And whatever you can do, whatever helps you to keep your devotion vibrant and alive. But the beautiful thing is, and I'll just end with this thought, we're talking about doing this and doing that and making focus and concentrating. Who's doing all of it? Remember when Master told Swamiji, if you've read The New Path, and he said, you need more devotion, Master said to Swamiji, because he had been rather intellectual. And so Swami began chanting all the time, inwardly and in his free time, and began just trying to develop that devotion. And he felt himself changing. And then word came to Swamiji that Master said to some of the other monks, "Look how well Walter," he called him Walter, "look how I've changed Walter." Who did the changing? It wasn't Swamiji, it was the Guru. The Guru does the changing, but we have to do our part. We have to swim in the river. We have to offer ourselves. We have to discipline our mind and our habit patterns in the world. But then it's the Guru's grace that keeps. How can we even begin to love God? You know, Swami has that beautiful song, "What is Love?" And I think that one of the verses are, "Surely we, children of this world, could not love by our own powers." So even the ability to love God is God's gift to us. And don't ignore that gift. Accept it with consciousness, with open hands, with open heart. You have given me the ability to love you, and I will return it with as much total self-offering as I can. But ultimately, as Ananda Ma said to Jyotish, ask your guru to keep you inspired. And if we reach up one hand to the God and Guru, they reach down too to help us. So it's a beautiful journey, and it's one that if we're sincere and don't let up, it's a journey that we will reach our goal of union with God. God bless you.
I've been wondering since yesterday what happens when you said about being inspired on the path. So when we start doing what we're doing here, and to our families we are changing, and sometimes they don't understand us, and likewise we don't understand them so much as we used to, and our perspectives on lives are changing, and we see that they're doing something wrong and we want to correct them, and sometimes we do and they brush us off, that you don't know what you're saying, let me do what I'm doing. And it's very difficult, it hurts us, that if I am doing what I'm doing is right and I'm telling them that what they're doing is not right, why aren't they listening to me? And it's very difficult because it demotivates us. Yeah.
Good question.
Yes, good question. Life is frustrating. People don't listen to us. The world leaders don't listen to what I have to say. The man who wrote the Narnia tales, his name was C.S. Lewis. He said, many, many people want to serve God. Most of them in an advisory capacity. And so God has endowed even the very atoms with free will. And we can only offer to others the gifts of knowledge, the gifts of wisdom. It's a very precious thing that we've received, because we really are. These teachings really do give us a broader perspective, a greater insight into things, and we really do have things that we can offer to people, but all we can do is offer. We can't impose. Swami used the analogy that if somebody holds up a little thimble and asks you to fill it, your family, for instance, you seem to be happier. Why are you happy? He said, fill the thimble, don't dump a bucket of water on them. And so whatever they're asking or even refusing to take from you, just give them a little bit, but mostly give them the model of your own happiness and your own greater ability to function. They'll see it. People are more perceptive than they seem to be, and especially family members. They'll use their elbows to create a little space for themselves, because the ego doesn't change itself easily. So be patient, be kind, be loving, and just wait until they reach out more, and they may never do it. Even Swami Kriyananda, when in his first years with Master, he was, of course, he was by nature very enthusiastic. And he came and he began sharing with his brother, and his brother listened for a little while, and he said, well, frankly, I'm just not interested. And that was it. Swami couldn't do any more to do, but over the period of time, his brother came to appreciate more and more that he really did have something to offer.
I'll just add briefly, and then we'll have time for a few more. Swami rarely gave advice to people if they didn't ask. He said sometimes he waited years to tell someone something they needed to hear because they weren't ready to hear it. And if you say it too soon and they reject it, then it's harder for them to hear it when they are ready. And so I think the best way is just through your own example, as Jyotish was saying. But also remember our own example, but the grace of the Guru. Almost everybody I know who has really given their life to God, their whole family has been blessed and uplifted and protected. It's certainly true with our extended birth family, and none of whom are on the path, but their lives have been uplifted and stabilized, and I can feel it's just Guru's grace protecting them. So by having one person in their family on the and for all of you, by having you on the spiritual path, your whole family will be blessed. Truly, I've seen it in many, many instances. Okay, so one more question. Yeah.
So I can't really immediately frame it as a question because it has like 30 seconds of story. I recently met this person who comes from a very a business family. He's quite rich and all. And I was talking to him and I suddenly started discussing spirituality with him. And he told me that in his family, his mother specifically keeps him away from spirituality because it's in his family, it's a thing that, we are in business and we have to stay materialistic because if we start being spiritual, then our business and our family will go down. So that sort of like, I was confused, like how do I answer that? I mean, if that's a way of life that's working for them, how can I say that, spirituality is the only path that can lead us to a happier life or let's say fulfilled life, when a total rejection of it is also, I don't know their life personally, but might be helping them because if it's a thing in their family. So I just needed your perspective.
It's a good question. And please tell us your names, both.
My name is Jatin.
Jatin?
I am Thaman.
Okay, so you want to start?
Well, spiritual progress, the evolution of consciousness is a long, slow road. What they will find is that the pathway that they've chosen could very well lead to material success. But what will material success give them? What will riches give them? Yogananda said that everybody in the world is motivated by the same single motivation, the desire to be happy and the desire to avoid pain. And so in this case, in this family, one might say the story that they have created for themselves is that business success and riches will make you happy. And you can't go in and say, oh no, that's false, because they haven't yet experienced it. But the soul within them is watching to see whether their ideas are successful or not. And gradually they will see that in spite of the fact that they are rich or that they have possessions, they're just as worried, or perhaps more worried, than they were when they didn't have those things. And they're just as unhappy, or even more unhappy, than when they didn't. So the best thing that we can do is be happy. And be happy and be joyful in our spiritual path. And they'll see a different model, or they won't. But we can't impose upon them. But nonetheless, you're right in the sense that if that is the particular illusion in that family, that this is how you lead a successful life, it's not up to you to break that, but it's up to you to live your life and give them another possible alternative for when they find that, as they inevitably will, that the material life alone is not bringing them the fulfillment that they're after. Because ultimately, the only thing that fulfills us is the upliftment of consciousness and the union with God.
But does that mean that a successful businessman can't find God? No, of course they can. And even my understanding is the man who founded Tata was a man of deep dharma and integrity, and it's a very, hugely successful global, but it's based on dharma. And so that, that's something to hold in mind, to transcend our karma is to live our lives dharmically. So if their karma is to be part of a successful business, they will grow by doing it in a dharmic way. And so that's a very important part, to just whatever we do, to make sure it's with integrity and in alignment with God's will, that we're helping other people by creating successful businesses. We're employing them. We're serving others through the products we produce. And also, just for your information, I don't think you need to share this with your friend, but Master's most advanced disciple in America, Rajarsi Janakananda, was a self-made millionaire. He started very humbly from a poor family, but he was a great yogi, and he experienced samadhi after just a few years of being with Master. But he would, every morning, he lived in Kansas City, Missouri, where his headquarters were, but he would visit Master all the time in California, come and stay with him. But he would meditate for many hours every morning, and his staff would say, "Sir, how come," he wouldn't get into the office till mid-morning. They said, "How can you afford to not come in so early?" And he said, "It's because I'm taking this time that when I come in, I can make the right decisions." And he told the story, he would be at a board meeting or something, and they would be reading a many-page financial report, and he'd be sitting there with his eyes closed. And then he would say, 10 pages back, you quoted a different number, a figure, a financial number, and now you're saying this, which is right. And they would put, "Oh, sir, you're right, we have 2 wrong figures here." But he said, "Because I have concentration, I can remember all these things." And so they're not antithetical. It's just how you do them. If it's for self-interest, that will come to an end, as Jyotish said. But if it's for just fulfilling your karma in this life, it can be a path to God as well.
In fact, Yogananda said that next to meditating and finding God, successfully and dharmically running a business that helps others is a very high path. So it's just depends on how you do things. Okay, one last question.
Namaste, good morning. My name is Mukul. I just want to ask you one thing. When you talk about perseverance and inspiration, we're always looking for spiritual progress also. So we want to know whether we're spending so much time, whether we're actually making some progress or not. So whether it's right to actually seek to know whether we are making that progress or not. And if yes, then how do we know that, whether we're actually making progress or not?
These are very nice
Yes,
questions.
very good questions. Whether it's right or not, we all do it. We want to know whether, and it's a correct thing to know whether what we're doing is leading us in the right direction or not. There are many signs, not what you might think they are. The appearance of miracles or the appearance of special powers or any of that, that's not signs of spiritual progress. Master said the surest sign is that you're growing happier and more joyful, and that if your joy is growing, then you're on the right path. So that's the surest sign. But he also said, the seeds of spirituality are planted and they need time to grow. And they won't grow well if every 2 days you pluck them out of the soil and see whether they're growing or not. So give it some time, let it relax some, but see whether you're more focused, whether you're happier, whether your relationship with other people is more loving, kind, supportive, and a lot of times people will begin to change how they relate to you because they feel a difference in you. But the surest sign of all is the growing sense of joy within.
Yes, and it's very hard to see it in ourselves because it's sort of like, well, Master used the illustration of a diamond covered with mud, and little by little we wash off the mud through our spiritual efforts. But the mud, our delusions, are not who we are. And so as they fall away and we become, the diamond of our soul nature becomes clearer, that, oh, that's who I always was. And you don't realize that all these other things have fallen away. When I first began hearing Swami Kriyananda give lectures, he was so clear and so made the teaching so accessible. And I thought, oh, well, I already know all that, but I didn't know it. But it was so familiar to me on a soul level. My soul recognized the truth of what he was saying. And so it's hard to tell in ourselves as the delusive power of ego begins to fall away bit by bit by bit. And we just return to our own self. But when we do, the more we do it, the more life becomes very, very comfortable. No matter what happens in the world around us, we realize, I have found peace within myself. And so it's just a wonderful journey of self-discovery. And the more we continue, and we can watch ourselves fall back into old habits of getting angry or something like that. But even the ability to see, oh, I'm getting angry again, that's spiritual progress. Because before you never saw it. And anyway, it just, again, it's about surrender to God and Guru and just say, I will do my best. But the final step, that's why Master said spiritual progress is 25% our own effort, 25% the grace of the Guru, and 50% the grace of God. But the 25% that is our own effort has to be 100% of what we can offer. So we have a good team, God, Guru, and our effort, and surely we will make progress.